Hi, I'm Ricky Boyd, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Join Jake and his friends on a journey through pop culture of the past, where they interview professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and so much more. Who will they be chatting with today? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Happy here with us. Thank you for joining. As always, I'm your host, Jake Steffenbaugh. With me today, as always, our co-host, Chris Bixby and Matt Dingle. How are you guys?
Doing good.
Doing good. Hi everyone. Jake, how you doing?
Doing great, Matt. Thank you for asking. And oh my goodness, what an amazing interview that you all are about to see. This
Yes.
one was so adorable. Chris, what do we have for today?
Yes, Sesame in the Heights and many more. We're so happy that we got to speak with him, and then soon, very shortly, you guys will be hearing it too. Joe Fiedler, he is the arrangements music director over at Sesame, has been there for almost 15 years now. We talk about, some of the folks he worked with at Sesame, some of his own solo projects, and many more. Here it is.
See you then. Hello, everyone. Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive.
Yes, happy you're here with us, folks. Today, we are pleased to welcome Joe Fiedler. Joe, happy to have you here.
I'm so glad to be here. Thanks for having me. And you get points right off the bat for pronouncing my name correctly. I don't know how you scored that one.
Nice sport points already.
Yes, absolutely. So, to start this off, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Yeah, well, I kind of have two careers. One is I'm music director for Sesame Street for the last 15 years. It'll be 15 years next month, actually. And then I'm also a professional trombone player. I do a lot of studio work for TV and film, and I also many of my own jazz projects and tour internationally doing that. So between both those things, that keeps me pretty busy.
Nice.
Awesome. So, what was your childhood like, and how did you grow up?
Well, I grew up in Pittsburgh, and which is a great place to grow up, and it was wonderful. And I didn't really have a musical family or anything like that, but I did play, and I was in the public school system, and I started in fourth grade playing trombone, and really music was kind of a sidelight in my. I thought I wanted to be. I mean, like any kid, I wanted to be a pro athlete. I played soccer, and I thought that would be it. But there was no professional league at the time, and we're talking the 70s and 80s. So, but I was really into playing soccer, and I played in high school and middle school and college. And then I kind of came back around to music midway through college. I actually I was at a small liberal arts school in Pennsylvania called Allegheny College, and then it wasn't working out for me, and I transferred back to the University of Pittsburgh, which is the next neighborhood over from where I grew up. And I just ran into an old buddy of mine from high school who said that the Pitts jazz band needed a trombone player. And I was like, well, I hadn't really played in a couple of years. And he's like, come on, come on, come on. So once I kind of started, he talked me into it. Then it kind of never looked back from that point.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So, who are some of your biggest musical influences or inspirations?
Trombonistically, there's a guy named Ray Anderson who's definitely my number one influence. He really literally changed the course of my life. I tell this story a lot. I mean, I know Ray now, it's really weird, but I was driving my car home after a date, like at 2 a.m. in Pittsburgh. And there used to be on the weekends, there used to be a show called Jazz After Hours. It was on Friday and Saturday nights from like midnight to 5 a.m. or something like that. But the guy was really meticulous. The DJ would always announce every sideman, everyone on each record. So I heard this trombone and I was like, holy crap, that's how I want to play. And I pulled the car off the road, just so I wouldn't miss who it was. And they said it was this guy, Ray Anderson. So Ray is one of my heroes. There's a piano player named Don Pullen, who's no longer with us, who's a big influence on me, compositionally especially. but I would say those two guys are the kind of biggest influences.
Nice.
Awesome. So, I'm kind of curious. Do you remember your first professional music gig was?
My first professional gig,
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
do. There was a guy in Pittsburgh named Tim Rogers who was starting a big band, and he had no money and he had only a few charts, and I guess I could picture the gig, but I don't remember exactly where it was. But it was probably like a $20 gig, a big band gig with this guy Tim Rogers, and I remember being really nervous. And also I remember I didn't understand the how musicians comported themselves, in the gig, because like between tunes, guys would talk and like, just like people do. And I was like, oh my God, we shouldn't be talking, because I was so green, I didn't know anything. But that was definitely, I remember that. And I played with Tim for a while. I mean, he had, probably 5 gigs a year, but when I was still living in Pittsburgh and, in my early 20s, I played with that band and a few others.
Nice.
Very nice. So you had the opportunity to play trombone for Lin-Manuel Miranda's In the Heights, which for you Broadway enthusiasts won the 2008 Tony for Best Musical. What was it like playing trombone for somebody like Lin-Manuel Miranda?
It was cool. That was a really great experience. I mean, I never wanted to do Broadway per se. I mean, I was never against it, but it was never on my radar really. And it's just a little backstory. As a jazz trombone player primarily, there's just not enough work to make a living. So I mean, just as any jazz instrumentalist would say the same thing, but trombone especially, hardly any bands have trombone, So I was making my living mostly playing with Latin bands, the top salsa bands. I played with Eddie Palmieri for 17 years. I played with Celia Cruz and a little bit with Tito Puente. And as it turns out, Lin, when he started to do In the Heights, he wanted to get especially the lead trombone and lead trumpet player. He didn't want to use Broadway musicians. Not that they weren't great musicians, but he wanted authentic Latin players. So they actually, from what I learned later, they scouted me. And so they offered me the job because I was one of the top Latin guys, and I did a ton of records in that scene. So, and then as a result, when they went to orchestrate the book for the show, they actually Taylor wrote it to me and my skill set. So it made it really extra fun to play every night. I mean, if you're going to play the same show 8 times a week, it was great to have that. And Lin was super cool to work with. And, I got to work with him later on Sesame Street together. And I was involved with the In the Heights movie. I played lead trombone on the soundtrack to that. And I actually, by that time, they hired me to reorchestrate a lot of the horns for the movie. They wanted to expand from the original orchestrations from the Broadway show. So Lin's been, I mean, peripherally, it's me going into that show because of the Latin scene really changed my life in a lot of ways, and it led to indirectly to the Sesame Street gig and to all kinds of things. So, and he's super easy to work with and a really obviously nice guy.
Nice. Nice. So through In the Heights, you got to work on the revival of the Electric Company. Can you talk
did.
about kind of how you began working on that show and what that kind of experience was like?
Yeah, it's really the Lin factor. So one of the orchestrators for the In the Heights Broadway show was a guy named Bill Sherman, who's become a pretty big deal these days.
Oh yeah.
And Bill was
Bill, yeah.
Yeah. So Bill was college roommates with Lin. I don't know if you know that.
Right.
And
Yeah.
so Bill, I mean, God, Bill was in his 20s. I mean, he might have been 27 or something like that when In the Heights opened. And, I was, at least 15 or 16 years older than him. So at some of the rehearsals for the In the Heights, because I used to do orchestrations for Larry Harlow, who's a legend in the Latin, and I arranged for Eddie Palmieri and so I, not just being a trombone player, but also a writer in that scene, there were some things that were not kind of authentic in some of the horn writing. So, and there's some of the rehearsals, I pointed some things out. I was like, this should really be like this, and the rhythms aren't quite right here. And they were like, oh, okay. But because of that, I kind of got on Bill's radar, and then Bill got offered. I don't exactly know how it came about for Bill, but Bill got offered the Electric Company gig. Sesame Workshop was reviving the Electric Company after maybe 20 years or so, 25 years off the air. And Bill got hired. And so he was working with there was just a 4-piece rhythm section, but they wanted to add horns for a lot of the episodes. So because I made those suggestions in the Heights rehearsals, Bill approached me, and quite frankly, he didn't really know that many people, because he was just a young guy, kind of just cutting his teeth, in the New York scene. So he approached me and asked me to write all the horn arrangements for the whole 3-year run of that, which I did, and I played on all of it as well. And really it was because of that we formed a really good relationship, and we kind of both, our skill sets very much complement each other. And while we were doing the 3rd season of the Electric Company, we got word that Sesame Workshop was going to change their music department for Sesame Street. And Bill was in the running. And then they offered Bill the job, but Bill he knew he needed me and I needed him. We were better as a team than Bill was doing himself. So he convinced them that we got hired together as the new kind of head of the music department.
Nice.
Very nice, very nice. So I'm
Oh,
kind
that's
of
wonderful.
curious.
Yeah.
Do you have any favorite Sesame Street Muppets?
Yeah, I do. Grover's my favorite by far. And I'll
Oh,
tell
yeah.
you
A
one of the,
lot of
Oh,
people
yeah.
said Grover.
Yeah, love Grover.
and it's interesting because so all the underscoring cues, like I compose myself, and then the songs, we have a team of songwriters who write the songs, and then I arrange and orchestrate the songs. So the thing is, I'm sitting in my little writing studio right now. I have to watch every little segment like 100 times, so it's like Grover makes me laugh so hard. That's why, and again, it's my job to watch Sesame Street clips over and over and over again. So I definitely, the funnier ones I love. And there's a newer puppet. There's a segment called, do you guys watch it all? Do you know the Monster Foodie segment, the food
Oh,
truck?
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
Gonger's
absolutely.
my new favorite too. He's
Love
hilarious.
Gonger.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, what Warwick Ronald Pike.
He's amazing. It's funny.
Oh
I
my
don't have
gosh.
I don't ever have to go to the set where they shoot. I mean, I try to go once or twice a year because it's super cool. But the second year that the Gonger was on, I made a special trip just to meet him and just to meet Warwick and just to see him in
Aw.
action, because he's so hilarious.
That's awesome.
Oh, that's great.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful. I mean, love that segment. I mean, that's wonderful. I was speaking of segments, kind of perfect transition. Actually, you got to compose the theme songs of some of their recurring segments, including the Super Grover 2.0 and Cookie's Crumby pictures. What went into composing those like?
It's really tricky, I gotta say, because there's really no guidance. And in those days, we had 3 co-executive producers, and it was very tricky because it was almost out of a comedy movie. You would go present some music to them, and one of them will be like, oh, I love it, and the next one will be like, I hate it, and the third will be like, eh. And then you write something else, and it was the opposite, so it was hard to get a consensus. So actually the first crack at the Super Grover 2.0, I tried to go really adventurous with this more a little bit angular melody and much more rocking. And but they said it sounded like Frank Zappa, was my feedback. So that got rejected. So it was really, like I said, it was more, I just kind of was on my own for Super Grover 2.0, just to kind of find my way through it. And I just, like anything, I watched tons of superhero theme songs and watched clips of Batman stuff, and just got inspired and kind of found my way through it. I'm really happy with how it turned out. It was great because they allowed me to hire. We have an 8-piece band for Sesame Street, but we don't have no strings. So they let me they gave me a little budget to hire string players for that theme song, which is great. And the Crumbly pictures, that's even harder because, literally that opening segment is like, I don't know, 3 or 4 seconds long. So to kind of write a compelling little thing. But there's all the, the MGM themes and all those little kind of snippets at the beginning of movies. I just tried to, that one I'm pretty sure I stole different ideas and kind of made an amalgam of a bunch of stolen little clever things. The funny thing with that, at the maybe our second season, because sometimes Sesame Street licenses different segments to like European markets and other foreign markets. And then we sometimes have to change some music, and sometimes we have to extend the credit crawl at the end. And so they said, they came to me and they wanted that opening Crumby Pictures theme, but they needed like a 45-second version of it. And I was like, what are you talking about? It's like, it's a 3-second little thing. It's over like this, So I had to expand it, and that really turned out great, but it's never been on in America because it was just for a foreign market. So, but those two segments, Super Groover 2.0, I loved, and that was sadly we only did it, I think, 2 years. But the Crumby Pictures, or whatever we called it, that is some of the best things since I've been at Sesame Street. That and Elmo the Musical, I think, are the best two things we've ever done. I mean, so clever, and the writing was great. And that's when Joey Mazzarino, he was the head writer for Sesame.
I love Joey.
Did you have Joey on your show?
Joey,
yeah, we did.
we've had
Yeah,
Joey.
Joey's awesome.
Had him on last year.
He's the
Yeah.
best.
We love him.
Yeah.
I miss him so much. Just his puppeting, his writing, and just his overall spirit. And also he was so, he was still a connection to Jim, to Henson, and just there's some things, that I've seen just at the set, or once a year. I'll tell you, we do a Sesame Street has a gala, like a big black tie event.
Oh,
It's the one time a year the band plays live. And I lead and we back up because there's always a musical guest. Like, we've had John Legend and Michael Bublé, and it's a big thing. And the hosts are always super famous people, like Oprah did it. And, so one year, Jon Stewart was the host, and they're super uptight at the gala. It's like clockwork, and there's teleprompters everywhere, and it's super scripted. And so John Legend, the opening bit was John and Murray, and with Joey was puppeting, the Murray puppet. And so I don't know, 30 seconds into the whole show, they're off script and just joking around and just riffing. And it's the funniest thing. I mean, like tears rolling down my face. I'm laughing so hard, but the directors are freaking out. And the teleprompter's scrolling up and down, like, where are they? And at first he's like, oh, I think they missed the line, but they were just winging it. But it was like, I missed that side of Joey too. Like him and Jon Stewart laughing, priceless,
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, and since you brought up Elmo the Musical a little bit, what was it like working on that?
Ooh, it was both unbelievably great and stressful. Because we have a certain amount of time to finish every episode, and Elmo the Musical, back then with the show was an hour, and what Elmo the Musical is, I don't know, were they 7 minutes or something like that? But in the 7 or 9 minute segments, there was 5 or 6 songs, and there was underscoring. There's so much music, but I had kind of the same amount of time to do that music as I did for, say, a Super Grover 2.0 segment, which only might have 5 or 6 musical cues in it, and they're smaller cues, So it was like I was putting in a lot of 60+ hour weeks. But the flip side of that is I think it was excellent. I think the concept was wonderful, and the CGI that we moved to a new CGI studio just to do that was so great. And the songwriting, we had a different team of songwriters now. I thought was really strong. And Kevin Clash was the driving force. He really wanted, that was his idea.
I love Kevin.
Yeah, I miss him too. Kevin and I got along really, really well.
Great.
Bill Sherman and Kevin butt heads a little bit, but Kevin could be a nitpicker, I'll say that, and a little too micromanaging, but he cared so deeply about the show and about the quality of the show.
For sure.
And he would come to some of the recording sessions, not everyone, but he would come, twice a month maybe, and I would pick his brain, like, because I would just ask, what was it like working with Joe Raposo and with Jeffrey Moss and these the original music directors, and he was happy to share. It was fantastic for me. I miss him as well.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. I mean, I'm in the musical. Such a great soccer one too.
It's great, and I wish I wish we could keep doing that, but it was so expensive. I think that's the reason why. It wasn't that it wasn't popular. It was just it cost a lot of both. The composers got paid per song. It's not like so like instead of paying one song in a street story like in a regular episode, you're paying 7 times that, and then the CGI was super expensive. So 7 minutes of your hour probably cost more than the rest of the other 53 minutes. So I think it was just unsustainable financially. But I think everyone loved doing it, and they love the product.
Absolutely. So occasionally you've also gotten to co-write some songs for Sesame Street. What do you have any favorites that you got to write?
Yeah, that might be up on Muppet Wiki. I'm not sure. I've only written a couple songs ever. I mean, like just the featured songs that the puppets sing. I wrote one called Incredible Iggy. There was a dog puppet named Iggy that was just a kind of random dog puppet, and then there was one called the PU Fight Song that one of Oscar's relatives, I think, sang. I can't even remember. But
That's cool.
Those are the only 2 songs, like featured songs, that were sung that I wrote
Gotcha.
myself. Because and I've written a bunch of the themes, like you mentioned, the themes, and then like I said, all the underscoring cues, which are I've written about 15,000, literally 15,000 music cues since I've been at Sesame. So I would write. I would be happy to write the songs. It's I just Bill. That's his realm. Like Bill used to write when we first started. Essentially, Bill wrote the songs and I did all the other music. And then over time, he's so busy. He writes maybe a couple songs a season, and he kicks them to different composers all the time.
Right.
And it's great because we get to work with Lin. And Jason Robert Brown used to write some songs for us, who was unbelievable. Oh, he's a big Broadway composer. You guys know Jason?
No.
He wrote. You should definitely Google him. He's a big deal, but he's fantastic.
Absolutely. And that's actually a perfect segue talking about music cues. What kind of goes into like composing music cues for Sesame Street? Like, can you kind of talk about that process?
Yeah. It's really unlike almost any other show in that it's so eclectic. Like if you watch another like kids show, like Phineas and Ferb, for example, the music's all the same. It's all that kind of electric guitar, and it's killing.
Yeah.
Like I love that show, and I have a daughter, and I remember watching all those shows when she was growing up. So and I know many guys who write for other shows, and so it's very, especially orchestrationally, it's all coming from the same place. Whereas Sesame Street, with all the different puppets and the different ways they could approach any show, one could focus on Alan at Hooper's store, who's who's an adult, and the other ones could focus on Elmo, who's supposed to be 3 years old, and they could be, and obviously the range of emotions could be from just slapstick to sadness, So that, in that regard, the music is really all over the place, which I like. So how it works is, once they shoot the most of the season in January, February, March every year, and then it takes the video editors a couple months to kind of start getting video to the music team. So like around April, we start getting video. And then how it works in all shows, but ours is no different, is Bill, being the boss, he watches first, and then he sends me spotting notes. So there's all the video we get is all time coded. So he'll say at 30 seconds, we need music here, and so forth. So then I get it, and then I have a week, or 4 days to write it all. And then, so each week it might be, I don't know, 25 to 40 cues. And some of them will just be like a ta-da, but others are many minutes long, and other ones are more cartoony, where we have to do what they used to call Mickey Mousing, which is like if Elmo's running and his hands are moving like this, the tempo has to be exactly that. And when he stops moving, the music stops with it. So a lot of those cues are very time consuming. Not that it's hard to compose the music, it's getting it perfectly lined up to the picture, to one frame perfect. And so there's a program I have called Sibelius, which is a notation program I write. But what you could do is you could embed video clips into it, so you could actually compose and watch the clip simultaneously. So anyway, like when we first started 15 years ago, Bill and I would be on the phone every single day talking about music cues, how we're going to approach it, and over time, we don't ever talk about it ever. I mean, like not once. And it's not in Bill's notes used to be like, I think the music should be kind of like this. And now there might be like the example I always use, because this is a true story. There was a banana puppet, and he's like 30 seconds, and his note was banana music. So, and it's now it's really whatever I want it to be. But it's not, I know what works, and I know what the producers like, I know what the directors like, I know what Bill's looking for. So, but within that, like banana music, I could probably go 10 different ways and have everyone like it. So it's really comes down to kind of what I'm in the mood for that day. You know, I also, I don't look at it as like I have my whole jazz career and trombone career as my kind of true creative outlet, even though the Sesame Street is super creative and fun. But my objective is really to serve the show the best way I can serve the show, you know, versus serving what I think is the best thing, you know. So because I have something else to do that for.
Right.
So within that, so then I write all the cues, and it takes me 4 kind of long days, you know, like I would say like 8-hour days at the desk. But it's not, the way I do it is I'm a grinder. Like I'll sit down here in this chair and then don't even get up till like 3 hours later, because I kind of go down this deep focus hole. But and then I since Bill has the same program, what I do is we, you know, on a Dropbox folder we have, I put all the cues there, and he approves them or sends notes to revise some things. And then we go to the studio every Monday. And then in the studio, I conduct the band and produce the sessions. Sometimes Bill's there as kind of another producer, sometimes he's not. And that's how, and then our engineer at the studio is also our assistant, our Sesame Street music department assistant. His name's Tyler. And Tyler's our mixer. So then Tyler takes home all the cues that we recorded, and then he mixes them and sends them. So he sends them about a week after that. And then I approve the mixes, and then we're done. We send them off to Sesame Street, you know. And then the last part of it is then the producers have a producer review another week after that. And if they don't like something, or they need a different version of something, we'll have to go back to the drawing board on those cues. But most of the cues, I'd say 95% at this point, there's no problem with. So that's kind of the cycle of it all.
Nice.
Awesome. Since you actually got to mention a little bit of Phineas and Ferb, check our episodes. We actually got to a while back. We actually got to speak of Vincent Martella, who was the voice of Phineas.
Yeah,
It's just so cool.
that's so great. That was my favorite.
Yeah, Phineas and Ferb's a good show.
It was so good. Music, and when I was so sad when my daughter's 20 now, but when she aged out of it, she didn't want to watch Phineas and Ferb anymore. I was so bummed, you know, because I loved watching it with her.
Yeah, and it's coming back. I don't know if you know, but
really?
It's coming back.
They picked it up for 2 new seasons for Disney Plus.
I did not know that.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely looking forward to that.
Me too.
Yes, yes, us as well. And you're very welcome for that information now, Joe.
Yes.
Yeah.
You said it's still on Disney Plus, you said.
Yeah, well, yeah, it's on Disney Plus, and then there's some new seasons coming out, like they're bringing the show back.
Okay. Yeah, I don't know where Sesame Street's going to end up.
I know, yeah, right.
We're networkless.
Yeah, I heard about that, yeah.
Yep.
We shall see. I heard rumblings that maybe October we'll hear some word, but I don't know.
We'll see.
Okay.
We will see.
Hopefully.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm kind of curious. Did you get to meet or work with any of the celebrity guests that got to feature on Sesame?
No, I don't. It's interesting. I don't have to deal with those. Like, I mean, I've had to email and things like that, and a lot of dealing with some managers sometimes, but I don't really, because when they shoot the things on the set, all the music's been pre-recorded. So, and if I want to go to the set, I could go just to hang out, but I don't really have to kind of work with them directly. Only at the gala, I have to kind of interact with the talent, directly. So, it's weird because people say, like, why don't you put on your resume you worked with such and such? And so I'm like, because I didn't really work with them. You know what I mean? We were both involved in the process, but we're kind of not directly working with each other. You know what I mean? And I wish they had, like, the old Sesame Street when they actually did perform live on the set. I think that was a stronger product, and I kind of wish they did that. There was one segment since I've been here, I think, or two. Dave Matthews sang a song with Grover one time on the set, and they sang live. And then for the 50th anniversary special, Elvis Costello sang live and played guitar on the set. When they sang,
That was
it's not easy being green.
with
Yeah,
Kermit the
yeah,
Frog. Yeah.
yeah.
That was
And
so great. That
I
wasn't
I
it
was
like
there that day. It was amazing, man.
yeah, wasn't it great seeing like Kermit like come back to Sesame Street after so many years?
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's the
That
one and only
was
time
awesome.
ever.
Yeah,
One only time since
exactly.
then.
Yeah. It was so great. That was a thrill to do that episode, or that special was so great. And like I said, I really wanted to go. Like I said, I don't have to go ever, but I went that day. And actually, I didn't even know the Elvis being green was that day. I just knew they were filming one of the segments from the 50th anniversary, but it turned out it was so good. It was so great to be there. And Jim's widow was there, and some of his family, and it was a really special moment to see it all and to see Kermit.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Did you guys have Matt Vogel on the show?
Oh
Yes, we
yes,
did.
Matt's
Yeah.
wonderful.
Yes, we did.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Oh,
Great
Matt.
guy.
He's such a wonderful
He's
guy.
wonderful.
Yes,
Yeah,
he
he's
is.
great.
Absolutely.
Certainly wonderful for what he's doing with the show, with the Count and Big Bird and all that. It's just wonderful.
Yeah,
Kermit
he's incredible.
and,
Absolutely.
characters he does he's doing from the Muppets now too.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's
Did
great,
a
and he's
awesome job.
directing episodes, and he's involved in all kinds of aspects, and he's great. I did some work. He has a pop band with some of his buddies. I did some arranging for him on the outside of Sesame, and it was great working with him then too.
Oh
So
wow,
just
that's
such a great
cool.
guy.
That's wonderful.
Yeah. That's wonderful. So your work on Sesame Street has led to creating 2 Sesame-themed albums, Open Sesame and Fuzzy and Blue.
Yep.
Could you kind of talk a bit about those?
Yeah, well, a couple people suggested early on, you should do Sesame Street tunes, and early on in my time at Sesame Street, and I thought, to be honest, it's so not my nature to have a gimmick or shtick or any kind of, that's just not most of my music. My own music I write for my own projects is typically more on the avant-garde side of jazz. It's definitely left of center and more adventurous. And my reputation is my reputation. And that's fine, because that's how I hear it, So the other thing was, if I'm ever wanted to do Sesame Street music with my kind of jazz sensibility, how is that going to work, So it kind of took me many years to kind of get up the courage to do it. And I started writing some arrangements, and it was really difficult, to be honest, to find my own voice within those songs, kind of make them my own, because they're, especially the iconic ones, they're so identifiable with Sesame Street, or some of them like sing, the whole Karen Carpenter version, which was, top 10 hit globally, and that the version's so iconic. So it was kind of like, how am I going to make them weird, but you know what? I just kept at it, and it took me many years. I just did it little by little. I wasn't gonna trying to, and then over time, I kind of put a book of music together, and then I started to record, and it turned out to be great. And the audience reaction everywhere we go has been just amazing. We're going to be playing at this big international puppet festival in Cleveland next month, but the puppet festival got postponed, but we're going to play in Cleveland anyway. So It's funny though. I thought that it would be this big, it would be very sellable, you know. Though my only disappointment was I thought, man, everyone knows these Sesame Street songs. We'll be able to have gigs all the time, but it kind of didn't work out that way. But I'm really proud of the music, and I think it's really great. I'll send you guys some copies when we'll get your address, and you know, I'll get some in the
Nice.
mail to you.
Nice. Love that.
Oh, that's wonderful. That'd be wonderful. Thank you, Joe. That means a lot.
Yeah,
Yes.
It
but
does.
I thought it was a really good meeting of my two worlds, a merging of my two worlds. It was really honest too, you know. And it was cool that it's really because I'm so into it and I've read everything about everything music Sesame that's out there. I mean, I would say I'm an unofficial expert on the music department at Sesame Street, and I'm just having access to the archives, and I could go in and see handwritten sketches of Joe Raposo's stuff and his original sketches of the original Sesame Street theme in his own pen, you know. And I got to know Raposo's son, who controls his royalties, and I picked his brain, and
Oh, nice.
Oh,
so
wow.
it's really, and part of why I like doing gigs with that band still is I between songs I talk about some of the lore and the history of how these songs came to be, and it's really interesting because a lot of the you know, the early in the 60s, the first, well, 69, 70, 71, those early animated segments like the pinball number count, you know, all that music wasn't done in New York, you know, and it was done, and just finding out who the musicians were and how that all came to be is just fascinating, because it was all done out of this studio in San Francisco called an animation studio called Imagination Incorporated. And and they had a music director, but there was no band, and there were freelance musicians, and like for example, on that song, you know, the pinball song, right? The people who are singing it is, I don't know if you know, or the Pointer Sisters, who are, you know,
Yeah.
the Pointer Sisters. Did you know that they were the ones who sang that?
Yeah. Yeah. That's
Yeah,
awesome. Yeah.
most people don't. I mean, I know you guys are in the
Yeah.
know. I know you are, but it's like those kind of things are just amazing.
I know. Yeah.
Yeah.
Wonderful. So now, what was it like, you know, getting to perform for the Open Sesame concerts in New York?
Oh, that was amazing. I was both kind of, it's a funny story. It was it was both, it was weird and great. And like the club we played is called Dizzy's at Jazz at Lincoln Center, which is really one of the premier jazz clubs anywhere. But and I played there many times as a sideman with other people's bands. But Sesame Street was going to be partnering with Jazz at Lincoln Center to do a big concert with the Jazz at Lincoln Center. And later that year. So, actually, it was going to be at a certain date. I don't remember whatever the date was. And so I knew what date it was well in advance. And I called, as I was looking to book a CD release for the One Open Sesame record. I called them and said, you know, why don't we do this, since you're already partnering with Sesame for that, in the big Rose Hall, the big concert hall, why don't you put my band in for the weekend, and we'll have a whole Sesame weekend. And they loved the idea. So I was going to play Friday and Saturday night there. And then what happened was, I don't remember why, but the concert with Sesame and Jazz at Lincoln Center had to be postponed. So they came back to me and said, we can't give you both nights now, but you can still have one night. So I said, okay. And then it got started getting weirder. Like about a month later, we're still like now 9 months out from the gig itself. I got a call from Jazz at Lincoln Center, and they said, hey, why don't you have Wynton Marsalis come play with you? And I was kind of like, well, and because I used to sub in the Jazz at Lincoln Center band many years ago and toured with them, so I knew Wynton really well, and Wynton's a great guy and obviously world-class virtuoso, but stylistically it was completely the wrong fit, you know. So I tried to explain that tactfully, but they were like, no, they were kind of insisting. So I was kind of like, all right. And so I said, okay, this is weird, but okay. And then another month later goes by, and I get an email from someone at the Sesame Street office, and they said, hey, why don't you have Elmo come sing a couple songs? And I'm like, well, again, I'm like, there's no vocals. I know there's lyrics to these songs, but we're not doing them as vocal. And they're like, nah. So they were kind of insisting. So then I'm like, what the hell's going on here? So as it turned out, behind my back, I mean, it's in a nice way, they kind of hijacked my CD release gig to use it as a promo event for the Jazz at Lincoln Center concert.
Interesting.
So
Wow.
they actually scripted the whole. So it was really just the first set. So they actually had a huge script. So I had to kind of like be this kind of PR guy for the Jazz at Lincoln Center partnership with, and then went and played. And you know, have you had Ryan on the show?
Ryan Dillon?
Yeah.
Oh yeah,
Yep.
Ryan's
Oh
awesome.
my god.
He does
yeah,
such a
he's-
wonderful job
yeah.
with Elmo.
He's amazing.
Another
Yeah.
great guy.
So,
oh my gosh, what he's doing now
Ryan
with taking
came-
over Elmo. Oh my
Yeah.
gosh.
Yeah. So in the end,
Another.
Yeah.
oh, right, he's the best, man. And it's we've become friends, you know. And but anyway, it turned out to be a magical night with Winton and Elmo. I mean, like, just the pictures I have for a lifetime, you know. And we sold out everything, and it was wonderful. And so the whole night was a huge success. And Ryan became a big fan. It's great. It's like when I go to the set now, it's so hilarious. Like sometimes you pinch yourself at how funny it is, because I walked in a couple months ago when they were a couple months ago, like now it's like 5 months ago, but and I hadn't been to the set since before COVID, and they were shooting something, and as soon as the director said cut, and then Ryan, or as Elmo turned and looked at me and said, "Hey Joe, it's good to see you." And it's always really funny when they do that shit. It was just kind of, oh, excuse me, sorry, but speaking of that, swearing, I didn't sorry, but when Kevin Clash was Elmo, and I used to go to the set a lot more, he used to curse at me as Elmo all the time, which was really, really funny.
That's funny. Oh man.
I had a feeling that would happen when the cameras weren't rolling.
I have some video of him
my
doing a
gosh.
voiceover.
Well, that's Kevin for you.
Oh, do you really?
What about Kevin?
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah, is it-
man.
No, I said that's Kevin for you.
Yeah.
Yep.
Kevin was funny, man. I don't know what's he up to. Do you guys even know what he's doing?
Well, I think so. He's on the Fraggle Rock reboot.
Right.
Yeah,
I knew that.
for Apple,
Yeah, he's doing that.
And he's doing conventions.
Yeah, he's been doing
conventions as
conventions. And he's definitely kind of made it at the Henson Company now. He's done a lot of projects with them
really?
over the past couple years.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's doing really well. I'll tell him you say hello.
Yeah, man. Please do.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's like helping taking over helping Dave Gold with Uncle Trav and Matt
Yeah, right.
revival. So
What? Say that again. I
He's-
didn't catch it.
He's pretty much taking I don't know what the term was. Not transitioning, but he's like helping Dave Goals out with Uncle Traveling Matt for the Fraggle Rock reboot.
Oh wow.
Back to the Rock.
Wow.
Yeah.
I think it's still Dave doing the voice, but
yeah,
also
but it's
for
just
puppetry. It's Kevin.
yeah, it's Kevin and
I think it's him and Frank
Vlad or
Meshkolite.
something like
I do
that.
believe.
Yeah,
Hmm.
Wow.
yeah, right. Because Dave doesn't want travel all that because of COVID and all that stuff. He's gonna be rather stoop do the sessions to his voice, and then someone else who are actually there can do the puppetry.
Wow.
So I think that's kind of how that came to be.
That's cool. I'll tell you my. Do you have time for a quick Kevin Clash story?
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah.
This is so when Bill Sherman and I got hired this first season, Kevin was still one of the executive producers. So they wanted to really expand the underscoring and make it more cinematic and just make it richer, because the old Sesame was just this tiny little small sounding band, which I actually really liked, to be honest. I thought it was campy and really worked. But so as a result, though, we were trying. But they didn't have, the three producers didn't have a clear vision. They knew they wanted to be more, but they didn't really know what that meant. So we were a lot of the episodes, and that we would write like a whole episode, like 35 long music cues, and have to go back and they would cancel all of them, and we'd have to underscore the same episode like 3 different times. And then we finally had we finally found our way. But in that process, there was an episode called Bert's Pigeon Search, I remember. And they weren't happy with the underscoring. And they decided, let's have a meeting. Bill and I had to go to the office and sit there with the three producers, and the five of us were in a meeting, and we watched the episode and we talked about the music. And so Kevin, he's like, okay, I got it. He's like, I know what the direction, he's like, that old movie, the Dr. Livingston, I presume. And he put on this really low voice. And I was like, okay, well, I don't know. He's like, no, there's that movie, Dr. Livingston, I presume. And I'm like, I have no idea what you're talking about, Kevin. And it was almost funny because he kept saying it over and over. So he's like, what? He's like, okay, Google it and go figure it out. So I go home and I Google Dr. Livingston. And so it turns out there's a movie. It's a black and white movie. I don't know, from the 50s maybe, or early 60s. And it's a true story about some British officer who gets lost in the jungle in Africa. And then they think he's dead. And he finally shows up wherever he's supposed to show up, but like 3 months late. And the guy opens the door, and he's all this ragged military, and he says to him, Dr. Livingston, I presume. And so that's the ref. So there's all this wandering through the jungle in Africa when the British guy from the 50s music. So what I did was I transcribed this music, and then I made sound alikes and kind of like, I did change it enough, but it was like referencing, if Kevin wants the music for Dr. Livingston, I presume, okay, I know what that is, and I've studied it, and I wrote off. So then I write a whole episode worth of Dr. Livingston, I presume, music for the Birds. So then we play it for Kevin, and he literally looks at me, he's like, what the hell is this? And I was like, this is Dr. Livingston, I presume, man. Come on, man. This is exactly it. So we literally had to scrap it all anyway and do something completely different, but I'll never forget that.
Oh my gosh.
That's crazy. Wow.
That's insane. So moving on from your work with Sesame, you've collaborated with countless other bands, including the New York-based Mingus Big Band as well. Could you kind of talk about your work with them?
Yeah, that's one of my favorite things, and it's been one of the longest associations I've had. I started more than 20 years ago. It's so Sue Mingus, who's Charles Mingus's widow, after he passed away, started as a tribute, just more as a one-off thing. She did a couple concerts of guys who you actually played with Charles in his bands. They did tribute concerts to Charles, and then it was so successful. She started getting one of Charles's favorite arrangers, a guy named Cy Johnson, to take a lot of his music and make big band arrangements out of them. And Cy was the backbone of that. And then she started a gig every Wednesday night, I believe, at the Time Cafe on Lafayette Street, which is no longer there. This is close to 25 years ago, I would say, she started. And then I started, it worked out great because it was an all-star band of, like jazz luminaries, huge Hall of Fame guys. But I was still in my 20s, my late 20s, when I might have been in my early 30s, but I was living in Manhattan, and I started subbing, and Sue took a liking to me. And then it was great because a lot of the guys in the trombone section were a bit flaky, and I won't mention any names. Guys would show up either late or not show up at all. And so Sue knew I lived close by because I was in Manhattan, and she would call me at the last second and say, come on down, we need someone to play. So it became, over time, then I became one of the regulars in the band. And how it worked for many, many years is, since we all live freelance lives and you might be on tour, you might have another recording date or other gigs, you can't make every week, on a weekly gig. So it would be, so for the trombone, there's only 3 trombones in that band. There was about 6 of us, maybe 7, who were really kind of the regular 7. And of the 7 of us, 3 would do it every week, because then it would work out great, because I might be away, and then it might be because of everyone else's schedule. You might play every week for a year, and then conversely, you might not play for 4 or 5 months because you're the odd man out for a while. So, but I love playing the band, and it's always refreshing. And over time, guys, some guys that were older and passed away, and other people moved on to other countries, and so it's like it's the band's evolved, but I still do it. I don't nowadays. I don't have the time to do it every week, so I don't even. But I do it probably twice a month. I'm not playing, and we've moved through many different clubs over the years, and it's just always been a regular thing and a big crowd favorite. I mean, Charles Mingus's composition is right up there with Thelonious Monk as far as most iconic jazz composers of all time. So it's really great to be able to be a part of that, and getting to know Sue so well. I mean, Sue sadly has passed on now as well, but her family, her son is actually now kind of the head of the Mingus organization now. So,
Oh, nice.
and it's because touring is not what it used to be, at least live music in general. I mean, from pop music, I mean, unless you're Taylor Swift, I mean, Madonna's canceling entire tours. Jennifer Lopez can't get a tour. So live music, we used to go to Europe all the time with that band, and now there's very few tours these days, which is a bummer,
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
that's the way of the music world. I mean, it's the same way for my groups, But I mean, jazz musicians in general, there was so many jazz festivals in Europe. You would go for like 6 weeks. I mean, literally, you go play jazz for 6 weeks in Europe, and over time, no one has 6 gigs, let alone 6 weeks worth of gigs. It's just. And I used to be. I mean, this has been going for a long time, so it used to kind of make me sad, and now it's just kind of just what are you gonna do?
Right.
Mhm.
Right.
But the
So
Mingus Band is great. I would recommend checking it out.
absolutely. Absolutely. So you've also had the great pleasure of working with artists like Celia Cruz, Jennifer Lopez, Wyclef Jean, and many more. What was getting to work with them like?
Well, with playing with Celia was definitely one of the highlights of my life. I don't know, to go way back when I was still in Pittsburgh, there was a guy. Pittsburgh at that time, talking in the 80s, the demographic was like 50% white, 50% black. There were no Asian people. There were no uh, uh, Latinos at all. Now because it's a completely different city these days. But at the time, there was a guy who was the auxiliary percussionist with the Pittsburgh Symphony named Rolando Morales, and his family's they're actually legendary. His brother's the principal clarinet player in the New York Philharmonic. I mean, they're that level. So
Oh,
anyway,
wow.
this guy, he was a Puerto Rican guy living in Pittsburgh, and he wanted to have a salsa band. So obviously, there's no Latinos, and he hired a bunch of. I think I was still in college, and he started just up. He had no money, and so he hired a bunch of college kids and taught us about salsa music, and he gave me records and taught me to listen to this band, listen to these guys, and I fell in love with it. And for some reason, I have an affinity for that music. I do it very well, and I don't know why, because I didn't grow up in that way. So when I came to New York, I knew there was a lot of work in that scene, so I fell into it, and then quickly, within a few years, rose up through the ranks that I was playing with Celia Cruz and people like that. So I did maybe the last 5 years of her life, we toured, and she was old, but it was so exciting because, I mean, she would walk with a cane and was like this old grandmother, right? And we would fly all over the country, and we were playing big halls. I mean, like the Chicago Theater in Chicago. We played Symphony Hall in Boston, like major venues. And but the amazing thing with her was she would sit on the side of the stage and just like this old lady, and then the lights would come on and they would announce her, and she would come on stage, and it was like she was 25 years old, and she would just bring it so hard and swing so hard. It was like the hair on your neck would stand up every time. It was so exciting. So that was great, and I actually got to do her last record ever. I played trombone on that whole record,
Oh, nice.
which was really a
Nice.
treat. As
Awesome.
far as Jennifer Lopez go, that was a thing. I used to play. I was the main sub in Mark Anthony's band, and then when they were dating back then, she started doing the tours with us sometimes. And then eventually she had her own group, and I did some gigs with her. And I have to say, she's kind of one of the first like major movie star, hugely, hugely famous pop people that I was ever around. And she couldn't have been nicer. I mean, the first time we were in the Dominican Republic on tour one time, and I'm sure her sister was there, and her sister was her birthday. So after the concert, there was a reception at the hotel, and just by circumstance, I ended up standing next to Jennifer Lopez and just started chatting her up. And she couldn't have been just nicer and easier to work with. And I mean, Mark Anthony, on the other hand, don't get me started, but Jennifer was great, you know. So it was fun, you know. It was really good money and really cool. It was the first time when I was touring with them, we were playing like arenas. I've never done like, you know, playing Madison Square Garden and places like that. So that was exciting on that level too. That was cool.
That's awesome.
That's wonderful. So you also led your own jazz group, the Joe Fiedler Trio. How did that kind of come about?
Well, I always knew if I had my way, I would make my living playing jazz trombone with my own composition and be a band leader. And that's just not possible, really. But even back in the day, 30 years ago, you could do a lot more than you can now. But my heroes, I mentioned Ray Anderson. His primary group for years was a trombone trio, trombone, bass, and drums. And another big influence on me was a German trombone player named Albert Mangelsdorf, who also played in a trio format. So that format and that sound of just the starkness of the trombone, bass, and drums was really in my head, and I was really inspired by both those players. So it just made sense that I would try to kind of continue that legacy of the more avant-garde trombone trio thing. So I was writing some music, and then that summer that I was starting to write a lot of trio music, I used to do a lot of jazz camps, and I was teaching at a jazz camp up in Maine. And the one cool thing about that, like most jazz camps, like at the end of the week or or at the beginning of the week, there's a faculty concert or a faculty recital. But at that camp, they really focused on listening for the students. So every night of the week there was a faculty concert, and how it was different is that every night somebody else would be the leader, the de facto leader. So you'd play every night, but playing different music. Anyway, the bass player and the drummer from that camp, the rapport we had, I had never played with either of the guys before. It was John Abair on bass and Michael Serene on the drums, and it was magical. Just we had this kind of telepathic hookup, and so it was just made perfect sense. Then we got back to New York. I called them up. We started rehearsing, and then it kind of really took off from there. And that was my longest running group. I mean, I'm actually going to do a new trio record in November, and with Michael Serene still playing with me 25 years later. But I played trio for many, many, many years, and it was great. It was a great vehicle. And it was cheap to tour because there was only two other guys, and we went to Europe a bunch of times. And it was actually it was one of the few projects I had that could make money, and I sold records. And I was recording my first couple of records were with a label in Portugal, because most of the audience for the music I do is in Europe. Which are a little more adventurous listening ears versus the Americans for jazz anyway. So it was really exciting. And then after time, after probably 15 years of that being my exclusive vehicle for creation, I just needed to do something else. So I started some other projects, but always had a soft spot for it. And like I said, I'm coming back to it this fall.
Nice.
Wonderful.
Nice. Nice. So since we're getting close to wrapping up, aside from what you just mentioned, can you share any projects you're currently working on?
Well, aside from Sesame Street and that trio thing, I have some tours coming up. I did a solo trombone record, literally just me by myself. It's my compositions, but there's a lot of improvisation, and so I'm doing a little tour of that. I'm playing in Madison, Wisconsin, in Milwaukee, and Chicago in October, and I have a mini 3-day tour with Open Sesame in Pittsburgh and Rochester and Cleveland next month. And then I'm doing the new record with a trio record. And then I have a trio tour in March in Europe that's still coming together. I'm going to do some workshops, and there's one of the big jazz schools is in Graz, Austria, and I'm going to go do workshops and master classes there and do the trio tour. Aside from that, I'm not sure. I'm gonna actually was emailing with Bill Sherman. He's working on a new Broadway show that's trying to come to Broadway. They're going to open at the Paper Mill Playhouse in New Jersey. And there's a bunch of Latin music. And he actually, I think I'm going to work with him on writing some horn orchestrations for his, well, I don't even know the name of it. So I can't even, I don't even know what it's called, but I'm going to be doing that in the off season. It's weird because Sesame Street, it usually takes us 10 months to kind of do the whole season. And then there's like a 2-month window or off. And it's great. I need to recharge my batteries because writing that music every day it's wonderful, but it's like doing crossword puzzles every day. Your brain has to drain. But this year we're going to finish, just due to a lot of factors, we're probably going to finish in like 7 months, which is unbelievable. And then, so I'm going to have 5 months off from Sesame Street. So there's going to be room to put more stuff in there. I don't know what it is yet.
Well, whatever it is, looking forward to it.
Yes, likewise.
Yeah, so to wrap this up, the last question that Jake's about to ask is a question we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead, Jake.
Thank you, Chris. Of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? In your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
How would I define the word nostalgia? Oh my God. You totally caught me off guard. I don't know. I would call it just a yearning for another time when you have some warm fuzzy thoughts about a different time in your life.
Absolutely.
That's what I think of it.
Definitely great words to end on.
Thank you.
Well, Joe, thank you so much for taking the time to do this. This was a blast.
It's so much fun. I'm really grateful you guys had me on. I really sincerely thank you guys for having me.
It was
Thank
awesome.
you.
Yes.
You're welcome, Joe. It means a lot. Thank you so much again for this, and keep up the great work of what you're doing now. I cannot wait what's next in store.
And you guys keep up the great work too. I look forward to checking this out.
Thank you, Joe.
Awesome.
Absolutely. And to all of our viewers and listeners, this brings another episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show to a close. Thank you again, Joe, for doing this. This was fun. Keep on the lookout for more wonderful interviews coming your way. And as always, what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time. Take care. Bye.
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 Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode. Be sure to follow Jake and the Happy Nostalgia team on social media, check out our website, and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.